Hi everybody, it's Katie, and today I am going to be talking to you about an audiobook that I heard this month, and that is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. This is the 2-disc CD version of it. It is the MP3 CD edition, so it only works on certain devices. I tried getting it on my computer, it wouldn't go on. I tried playing it in my vehicle, it wouldn't go on. So I ended up getting it to work when I played it on my DVD player. So that's how I ended up listening to it, and because of that, and I knew that there was no proper way to pause it so that I could come back to it later, I ended up just plowing through this book. I think it took the book is a little over 19 hours, so I ended up putting it on after church and listening to it till 11 o'clock at night. Got it, the whole CD done, first CD done in one day. This is the first Neil Gaiman I have ever been exposed to. I know that he did a 75 comic book series called Sandman. I have another book by him called Norse Mythology, which I do plan on getting onto soon. But with the new American Gods TV show on Stars, I thought that I would want to hear the book or read the book before I even try to venture into watching that. This was a roller coaster. This was an absolute roller coaster. So much was going on in this. There was no time to just sit down and stop, because everything was going on in this book at one time. Released from prison, Shadow finds his world turned upside down. His wife has been killed. A mysterious stranger offers him a job. But Mr. Wednesday, who knows more about Shadow than possible, warns that a storm is coming. The battle for the very soul of America. And they are in its direct path. One of the most talked about books in the new millennium, American Gods, is a catastrophic journey deep into the myth and across American landscape, eerily familiar to utterly alien. It is quite simply a contemporary masterpiece. The most simplest way to describe this book. Shadow does lose his wife. He finds out days before that he's being released from prison that he's being released early because his wife died in a car crash, and he thinks that if he can just go home, then everything will end up being better. Nothing will have happened. It was all a big lie, a conspiracy to get him home early. He finds out that that is not exactly true. There is just about every pantheon in this book, from Norse, which is the main, and the fact that Odin is the main god that you travel with for the most of the time. The Egyptians, to the Hindus, they even mention Jesus. This was everywhere. It was all over the place. This audiobook was presented by George Goodall. It was okay. I mean, he did some of the voices. He just had a very hard time doing voices along the lines of female voices, like Easter. I rated this book a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads, simply because there was so much that, heaven forbid, you just don't listen to it for 5 minutes. You've missed 3 battles, a childbirth, and 2 gods being introduced. So you have to pay attention all the time. That is the summary part of American Gods by Neil Gaiman, read by George Goodall. And now I'm going to go into some other stuff about this. Odin is Shadow's dad, and he tried to fight, and then it was this weird, thinking back on it, it was this super weird parallel, because Odin, he lives off of the blood and death and destruction that is done in his name. That's why at the beginning of every battle, they said, I dedicate this battle to Odin. In front of every death, I dedicate this death to Odin, so that it was feeding him that energy. And then Odin had Shadow do as he did and die hanging on Yargisil in order to stop the war, to stop the fighting, to stop the chaos, to just stop. And that just, it was a very, God sent Jesus down to die for the sins of everyone. And it was just that parallel there, and it made me a little bit uncomfortable, but I coped. Your judgment is not just by the judgment of who you believe, it's the judgment of all of the gods in which they believed in you. So you could be judged by a Hindu god, an Egyptian god, and an African god, because they believed in you, so that they can judge you when it comes to your death. And each one of their persecutions on you is you dying another way. Like, they take your name, they take your heart, they take what you live for. I liked Easter. Easter was hilarious. I wish there was more of Easter. Do I recommend this book to other people? Yes, I do recommend this book. If you are a type of person that does not like hearing about the pantheon and the praises that were used to those pantheons, which is not the God in which you believe, then I would not read this book. I also find other religions and other belief systems to be really interesting, to see what they believed and how they believed it and what they believed was the right way. And I am a big Norse mythology person. I like reading that, which is why I'm going to be reading the Neil Gaiman book, Norse Mythology, why I read the Percy Jackson books, which is Greek, and then the next series, which is Roman, and then the series after that, which is Egyptian, and then the series after that, which I am reading simultaneously as all of those, which is Norse, and then we go back to Greek, and I like looking at the different takes of these different gods. So if you are definitely into that sort of concept, to the open-mindedness of exploring the basis of what those in the past and even at times currently believe, then yes, I recommend you read this book, because it is such an interesting take on some of these characters that are becoming more and more well known, from Rick Riordan, from Neil Gaiman, from Marvel. The war that happened between the old gods and the new gods, that the war ended up being, we didn't see the actual war. We saw like them starting to fight, but there was no war, because 9 days ago Shadow was hung from Yargisil, and of course Loki was the one that started the war. I like that, you know, the new gods are the gods of the luxuries that we take for granted in America today. Television, internet, gods along those lines, that, you know, I watch television. I'm always on the internet. I'm watching television on the internet. And it's really weird to think of the fact that by doing those actions in a way that we are worshiping the acts of technology that have developed, and they talk about the new gods that have died, the telegraph, the railroad, and things like that, that people worshipped because it was so state-of-the-art, that it was so new, but now is not used at all today, because they're on shaky ground as it is. Because, you know, internet that started off as cords and wires underground and on the bottom of the ocean, and now it's turning into fiber optics. So now is internet going to die off because the fiber optics god is going to come in now? Or is the internet god going to just grow and absorb the fiber optics? And it's definitely something really interesting to think about, the fact that we do worship all of these things that are handed to us. I mean, how many of you feel naked without your cell phone? I had to go somewhere today and I had to leave my cell phone in my vehicle, and I felt naked the entire time without my cell phone. It just felt so off not to have my cell phone in my hand with my pop socket just not there, not on me. Is that a form of worship? That need to have this piece of technology with you at all times? As much as I could say, well, I have the Bible app and I read off of that every day, it's still using this technology. I don't know, it's just something really interesting to think about. This disc set also had an interview with Neil Gaiman right before this book was published and people could go out and buy it, and they talk about it, and he says that this story was just so big that if he had this book for another 5 years, he probably would have written a 2,000 to 3,000 page book just to bring in more gods and talk about more pantheons, like the Japanese gods he would have brought in more, and talk about how they were still worshipped during the American-Japanese internment camps and how they incorporated into things like this. He also talks about how he turned it in a year late because there was just so much that he wanted to get to and put into this book that he just needed more time to figure and sort everything out. It was a lot to take in, and it definitely made you critically think things that you do in your daily life that would be acts of worship to these new gods, and how that would affect the old gods or your God or whatever you believed in or didn't believe in. That is American Gods by Neil Gaiman, the audiobook read by George Goodall. Follow me on all of my different social media. I'm on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and Goodreads. I also have a website and an email that you can contact me on there as well if you so choose. All of that information is in the description box down below. With that being said, I will talk to you later. Bye.